Just before sunrise, when the hospital hallways were still hushed with the kind of silence people stop questioning after 3 years, a whisper cut through room 317. "Robert, please. Don't leave." Hannah's voice trembled, not from fear of losing her job, but from the crushing truth that she was the only person still speaking to a man everyone else had already mourned. Her fingers brushed his hand, expecting nothing. Expecting the same stillness, the same quiet surrender. Then the heart monitor jumped. Once. Defiant. Hannah froze. "Did you hear me?" she whispered again, her breath shaking. And this time, the faintest twitch pressed back against her palm. Machine beeped louder. A nurse rushed in, dismissing her with a sigh. "Reflex. Don't get attached." But Hannah's chest tightened, because she knew what she felt wasn't a mistake. It was a fight. And if she was right, then everything the Adebayo family believed about the past 3 years was about to explode. What happens next will expose power, betrayal, and the one voice that refused to let him die. If this opening pulls you in, tap like and subscribe to Real Life Stories New. New chapters of truth and courage are waiting. The heart monitor hadn't settled yet when Hannah stepped back, letting the doctors take over. The corridor outside room 317 buzzed with alarm, nurses rushing, orders echoing against the sterile walls. Yet all she could hear was the faint echo of Robert's breath. His own breath, pushing past the ventilator. The moment she had feared would destroy her had instead cracked open a future no one dared believe in. But the hospital was not a place that welcomed miracles quickly. Word spread, first whispered, then sharp, then twisted. Some staff said she'd acted recklessly. Others insisted she was lucky, nothing more. A few muttered that people like her always tried to force their way into stories that weren't theirs. Hannah kept her eyes low, but every comment cut deeper than the last. Still, she returned to Robert's room every chance she had. Now, when she spoke, there was a flicker behind his eyelids, like someone inside was turning toward the sound of her voice. "You're not alone anymore," she whispered, brushing a loose strand of hair from his forehead. "They're starting to see you again." What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that someone else was watching from the shadows of the corridor. Victor Danjuma. His expression was unreadable. His jaw tight, hands clasped behind his back as if he were holding something dangerous inside. He left without a word, but the look he gave her was enough to chill the air. Days passed, and Robert's responses grew stronger. His hand squeezed with clearer intent. His breathing synced with Hannah's voice. Even Dr. Mensah, cautious, disciplined, found himself leaning forward each time she spoke. "Elijah," he said during one assessment. "He's responding more consistently to Hannah than to any other stimulus." Elijah's face was a storm of hope and disbelief. "Do what you need to do. Just keep him safe." But safety was already compromised. Late one night, while Hannah was leaving for her bus, she caught a conversation between Victor and a junior administrator. "We need to control the narrative," Victor said sharply. "If he wakes and starts talking, we lose our leverage." Leverage. The word pricked her skin. She froze behind a pillar, breath shallow. "Sir," the administrator whispered nervously, "if he remembers." "He won't," Victor snapped. "And if he does, we'll handle it." The tone wasn't managerial. It was dangerous. Hannah hurried away, heart pounding. Something inside her stirred. Not fear exactly, but resolve. For 3 years Robert had been silent. Now he was fighting his way back, and she would not let anyone push him under again. The next morning brought a breakthrough no one expected. Robert's eyelids lifted, slowly, shakily, but opened long enough that the staff gasped. Margaret nearly collapsed with joy. Elijah grabbed his son's hand like he was afraid it might disappear again. "Robert," Elijah whispered, voice trembling. "It's Dad. I'm here." Robert blinked, disoriented. Then his gaze drifted, landing on Hannah. Recognition. Weak, fragile, but unmistakable. Hannah covered her mouth, her eyes filling. "Hi," she whispered. "Welcome back." For a moment the room felt sacred. Then Robert's breathing hitched. His face tightened, a shadow crossing his expression. "Car," he rasped. Dr. Mensah leaned in quickly. "Robert, take your time. What about the car?" "Voice," Robert whispered. "He told me to stop." Elijah frowned. "Who?" A tremor crossed Robert's hand as he forced the name out. "Victor." Silence cracked open like glass. Hannah felt the room tilt. Margaret gasped softly. Elijah's face drained of all color before hardening into something unrecognizable, rage sharpened by heartbreak. "Son," Elijah said quietly, "did Victor speak to you before the crash?" Robert swallowed weakly. "Said, you needed me. Wanted me to pull over. I didn't. Then headlights. Too fast." Hannah reached for his hand instinctively. He gripped back. "Elijah," Dr. Mensah said softly, "we'll need to verify everything in a controlled environment. But what he's recalling, this level of detail, it's not accidental." Elijah stood slowly, every muscle rigid. "I trusted that man with my company. With my family." Margaret placed a trembling hand on his arm. "What will you do?" Elijah didn't answer. He didn't need to. 2 days later, investigators arrived quietly. Records were pulled. Traffic footage reviewed. Phone logs subpoenaed. A sequence of encrypted transfers emerged, tying Victor to a contracted driver known for staged collisions. Not speculation. Not rumor. Evidence. The betrayal was undeniable. When security brought Victor into the administrative wing, he still tried to smile. "Elijah," he said coolly, "there must be a misunderstanding." Elijah stared at him, no longer the controlled businessman, just a father stripped raw. "You tried to kill my son." Victor's smile twitched, faltered. "You have no proof." "We have everything," Elijah replied. "Every call, every payment, every lie." Victor's expression finally cracked. "You can't pin this on me," he snapped. "You need me. This company needs me." Elijah stepped closer, voice low and sharp. "I don't need a traitor wearing a suit." Victor lunged, not to attack but to grab Elijah's arm as if trying to salvage control, but security pinned him instantly. "Get your hands off me," Victor shouted, his voice echoing through the hallway. This girl, this maid, she meddled in things she didn't understand. She ruined everything. Hannah, standing nearby, didn't flinch. For once, she didn't lower her gaze. "You did that yourself," she said softly. Victor's eyes widened with hatred. Elijah turned away, offering only 2 final words. "He's finished." And he was. Victor was removed from the premises, arrested before sunrise, charged with conspiracy, attempted murder, financial fraud, and obstruction. His name vanished from the company directory within hours. And across the city, where he once walked with arrogance, people now crossed the street to avoid him. But inside the hospital, the atmosphere shifted toward something warmer. Hope built on truth instead of pretense. Robert's recovery accelerated. Physical therapy grew steadier. Speech clearer. Strength slowly rebuilding. But what changed most wasn't his body, it was his presence. The distance, the detachment he once wore like armor had shattered. One afternoon, during a therapy session, he managed to lift himself from the bed to the chair beside it. Sweat dripped down his temples, but he smiled weakly. "I'm getting back," he whispered. Hannah smiled. "No, you're moving forward." Later, when Elijah invited her to the mansion, not as staff but as someone who mattered, Hannah didn't know how to breathe for a moment. She sat cautiously on the edge of a sofa worth more than her entire neighborhood, feeling like she might disappear into the fabric. Elijah entered with 2 folders. One for her new role as Robert's trained caregiver. One for something bigger, her education. "You saved him," Elijah said quietly. "Let me help you build the life you deserve." Hannah tried to protest, but Margaret stepped forward and hugged her gently. "You brought our son back," she whispered. "Now let us lift you the way you lifted him." Days blended into weeks. and the mansion gradually lost its coldness. Light returned to hallways where grief once lived. Margaret filled the air with soft hymns. Elijah softened, speaking less like a ruler and more like a man who had learned the cost of silence. And Robert, now steady on his feet, walked the garden path for the first time. Hannah walked beside him, close enough to catch him but far enough to let him try. "You know," he said softly, "for 3 years everything was dark. But whenever you talked, it felt like someone was pulling me upward." Hannah swallowed, eyes warm. "You did the hard part." Robert shook his head. "No. I followed your voice." They paused near a blooming tree. The air smelled like earth and sun. For a moment the world was quiet again, but not the hopeless quiet of room 317. A living quiet. Then a security guard jogged up, slightly breathless. "Sir," he said to Elijah, "news just confirmed. Victor pleaded guilty. All charges. He's facing decades." Elijah nodded once, firm. "Good." Robert looked at Hannah, a slow, relieved smile forming. "It's over," he whispered. Hannah exhaled shakily, finally letting herself believe it. But before the scene closed, before the day settled into gentle peace, one thought pulsed in the air. A question meant to pull the viewer deeper. If the truth can survive 3 years of silence, what will happen when Robert speaks publicly for the first time? The days that followed carried a quiet warmth no one dared predict. Robert grew steadier, his steps firmer each morning, and the shadow that once lived behind his eyes faded into something brighter. Hannah watched him reclaim the pieces of his life, not with the urgency of someone trying to outrun the past, but with the calm strength of a man finally choosing his own direction. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the garden wall, he paused beside her. "I used to think truth was something people either believed or ignored," he murmured. "But it's stronger than that. Wait. It pushes through." Hannah nodded. "And when it finally arrives, no one can bury it again." They stood together in the golden light, the air soft and still, the world settling into a new shape, one built on everything they survived and everything they refused to surrender. Somewhere inside that silence was the message they had earned. Change begins the moment someone decides to speak, even if their voice is faint at first. As dusk wrapped around the path, a single lantern flickered to life on the porch, casting a warm glow across the stone. It felt like a promise. Simple, steady, unforgettable. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to Canada's Heartfelt Tales so more people can experience moments like this.